And good morning. It's Steve. Thank you once again for that song. And yes, it made us all smile. Fellas, we are continuing our study in the Gospel of John. We're in week 240. We're looking at a critical moment in the life of Peter and analyzing it, and of course, drawing out our own experiences in light of what Peter, this dramatic change in what we see Peter being about. If you put the narrative, all of the chapters where we see Peter, and then of course include the other Gospels, Peter's actions uh, of self assurance, courage, boldness, leadership, and they all come to this moment at the arrest and within the court of Caiaphas. We see quite a different change. And so we're spending a little time analyzing that to try to gain some understanding. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. So I'm proposing the idea that there's got to be an end before there is a beginning. There has to be space created for something new to happen within Peter's life, and I think it's also true within our journeys as well. In the court, in John 18:25 through 27, we read Simon Peter was still standing, warming himself. And our last time we met, we were looking at verse 24, and it was his first denial. And so we're picking up on that first swing when he denied. And of course, we know by being around a few years that there's three denials. So the people, the guardians, the people within that arena, they said to him, Peter, you're not one of those disciples, are you? And then Peter denied it. That's the second swing. And he said, I'm not. One of the slaves of the high priest, who happened to be related to the one who Peter cut off his ear, he said, didn't I not see you in the garden with him? And Peter then denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. You know, I read that and I have an emotional response. I just feel so empathetic towards Peter and what he's going through at this moment. It's not judgment at all. My goodness, no. He's so human, and he's becoming in touch with Peter, and that is what needs to change. So review and Steve, this aligns with what our song was about this morning in the downside of it. The song that you brought this morning, I See the Light, of course, is the flip side of this one, but it's the idea of alignment. Because I think I don't think this is a Peter thing. I think it's a human thing. And I'm submitting these ideas to you guys for your consideration and discussion. You know, it's my I'm not alone in this, but it's how I tend to see what Peter is going through. So here's Peter on the left, and because Peter is a human being, he has an understanding of what Peter knows. This is Peter knows a slice of what is actually existing, and those what he knows is illustrated by what's between the two lines. This is what Peter knows, and you and I could be put in the same place of Peter. We know a portion of what actually exists. And let's be benevolent here. According to cognitive scientists, and roughly, uh, the way we handle what we know and what we don't know, which would be outside of that realm, um, we actually can expand and go 15% in a roughly stated 15% of what we know, we can adopt, we can negotiate, we can question, we can dialogue with, um, up to 15%, roughly speaking, 5 to 15. We're going to be benevolent and give him a full 15%. But outside of that 15%, we generally reject it, we criticize it, we turn our head and we leave. And it's really hard for us to grasp that. I mean, we can't, we generally reject it. And that's just a human reality, according to um, cognitive scientists and people in the know. But I've known I've known about this for quite a few years, and I've taught about it at our later camps in Way of Wisdom. This idea, because it helps us understand other people. If we understand, well, he or she is just not able to grasp that. And I think knowing that, and knowing our own limitations, I mean, that's what we want to grow into, I think is helpful. So we've looked at this in the past, and we've got Peter on the left, and we're expanding his rails to 15%. But like all of us, Peter has ideas, the light bulb, and people who exist outside that, beyond that 15% of knowing. And Peter in the past has been very self-assured, and he's fired Peter bullets, let's call them Peter bullets, extended energy towards other people with the goal, I mean, other ideas, bringing other ideas into his realm. They're just on the border, and his way of operation, how Peter has operated, is just like I operate. Idea is not correct. We need to bring it inside so I can understand it. So that's what Peter has experienced in the gospel, and the same is true with Peter, with those people, Steve, out of alignment in Peter's mind, is to fire a Peter bullet, and I'll get to that idea, that analogy in just a minute. Um, to extend energy towards other people to get them into alignment with how I think. This is a rough illustration of how, or simple, how Peter has framed his world. Now, here's the idea. Power is exerted, the Peter bullets, to bring the other into alignment with how the one needs the other to be. So it's more about Peter's need than it is the idea or the person. Peter is exercising energy, Peter bullets, in order to get other people and ideas where he needs them. His world, we call it control, so he could control it. Now, he's not aware of this, just like you and I are not. We're not maliciously trying to do this, but for us to make sense out of anything, we have to bring divergent ideas together somehow, or we dismiss them. And this is bringing definition to that reality. Power is exerted to bring the other into alignment with how the one needs the other to be. Now, this is where I get the idea of Peter bullets. Peter has X amount of bullets. Let's say he's got 6 bullets. And if he fires 2, that means he has less bullets or less energy. And I'm making the analogy, less power. Now, power is perceived power, power of self-assurance. In the physical world, when a battery is used to shine a flashlight or to run your watch, over time that battery is depleted, the power is depleted and has to be replaced. That's the idea. that we just don't go around firing bullets with an endless supply of ammo. When we exert energy, our Mike bullets or Dave bullets or whatever, is uh, that I am depleted to some degree and I need to be replenished. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So the exertion of power weakens meaning self-perception. It's not in reality, but it's how I perceive it. I need something to be replenished. And that replenishment returns through this way, either my own motivated reasoning. In other words, I've created a construct. Peter has created a construct of how things ought to be. And when people align and come into alignment and ideas come into alignment, he says to himself, well, gee, yeah, that's because they were. I just see something on the screen by uh, where's Carl? Is Carl here? Anyway, um, something is in a Peter needs to bring something into alignment, and that's replenished. His power is perceived power is restored if he gets validated. Oh yeah, they were out of alignment and they were brought in, so I can feel good about me. Also, our social constructs, our social support is very necessary, but also it can support ill thinking as well. A tribal way of thinking that the group says this is right, but it may be right, it may not be right, or it may be partially right. But we get support. Oh, Mike, you're doing such a good job. You're so profound. Keep it up. And that just keeps the energy moving and that restores my sense of self power. So that's what Peter's world is about. His world up till now is pretty much aligned with how Peter wanted it to be, and that's what needs to change. Can you guys see that little blue mark? Is that a yes? I don't know.
It's
That
there.
when that was made, that's what I kind of staggered with because it said it wasn't Carl, it was his wife's name. And so I don't see Carl.
He's here.
Carl is here.
Yeah.
Okay, I just don't. Hey, Carl, welcome. But anyway, you somehow marked on the screen and you've left your mark, Carl. We all try to do that. I thought that was funny. Okay, what Peter is experiencing. So that's how Peter's history has been. And I think we can identify with that. I can certainly identify from my own experience. So what's going on now in the garden is something quite different. We're seeing a different Peter, and this next slide explains why. We got the same rails, what he knows, what he doesn't know, and we're going to be benevolent and give him a 15% stretch. Just call him a very open Peter. I don't know if he was or not, but let's say he was. And there's ideas and people who exist outside of that. This is where we were on our last slide. Okay, Peter does what Peter does, and he fires Peter bullets. And in this case, the idea doesn't budge. Okay, and you did it too, Dave. Is this an anarchy here? You're going to start drawing on the screen. So Peter fires a bullet to people who are out of alignment. Steve, there's that term, alignment. And when Peter fires bullets, nobody responds. Peter is in a different soup now. His world is dramatically changing because his world is not responding how Peter needs his world to respond. And he's firing his bullets. That's all Peter knows is his Peter bullets. And his Peter bullets are not being effective. And what the only outcome that is happening is with every firing of the bullet, his power, his self-perceived power, which would be his confidence, his self-confidence, it's starting to collapse because people are not responding the way he needs. And so what he does is he just keeps going. He does what we all do, all we know how to do, get a bigger hammer and keep firing bullets, and people don't respond. And so what happens is power exertion further weakens the one. He is a very low Peter at this point, very vulnerable, very weak in his own self-perception. Okay, thus Peter has done everything within his understanding, which is fairly limited. All he knows is his bullets, his Peter bullets. That's worked in the past. It doesn't work now. But he's done what he knows how to do to bring about alignment. He needs alignment, but his world is not cooperating with alignment. We're starting to explain the state of Peter's head right now. So Peter puts this puts Peter in a place. What I'm describing puts Peter in a place that we could define as disorder. This is a state of disorder. Now I'm going to move to the next slide, and I'm going to start to explain, from my understanding, what this looks like in light of a masculine journey disorder. And this is where we're going with the study today. And I'd really like, during our table time, your take on this idea. I've made an attempt to diagram, and I've used this for 20 years, but it's changing. My words and definitions are changing. Some of you have seen me talk about this, and I've maybe talked about it here, but I've changed how I define things, and I won't go into why, but it's just simply because I think it brings more clarity. So we're going to introduce this idea of disorder in context to a full journey in a person's life, and then we'll talk about it. Here's my introductory statement. Let's first look at disorder from the framework of a life being lived. Okay, your life and my life. So we exist right now. We believe that we are more than physical existence. We believe in an existence outside of this physical world. Jesus stated it as, I came from the Father and I'm returning back to the Father. But we're talking about our physical existence here tied to earth, our material existence. We are in material state at this point. So that's what that bottom portion is about. Now we're going to create a graph of an X, Y axis. The X axis is time. Time starts at our birth, and it moves across to the right to our eventually our death. But at this latter portion of our life, this season time of life, time is moving, and we know time is linear. And so in the physical realm, we're going to look at time from that perspective. And we were created a certain way. Notice the solid image. Solid, and I believe each one of us were thought about by God, our Creator, and created as an act of love. We are brought into this world, and we are fully accepted, fully adorned, fully beloved by our Creator. This is coming from my head, guys, based on my understanding of faith, belief, the Bible. Now, what happens in time, the y-axis, is that we tend as human beings, guys, and I'm very cautious here because I am not making, don't mean to make blanket statements, but from my limited observation and by reading and by hearing people, just through observation and getting input from other people, I think we as people tend to self create our image of who we think we need to be, who I think I need to be, or who I think, who others think I need to be. So that's represented by this kind of blurry image. And here's why. It it kind of looks like who I am here. It resembles, of course, but I'm looking all the time to my world around me, my immediate family, and I'm looking for feedback and when I get feedback in a positive direction, that strengthens my sense of being. If I'm receiving negative input or no input, it really puts me in a state of perceived weakness. I don't know who I am. So there's this in the early stages of life as we're developing, we move in and out of what we tend to create who we think we need to be. And it's kind of like who we really are, who our creator has made us to be, but there's some variations of what as well depending on our upbringing. So that's what these slides, or that's what this represents. So as we I wanted to erase that. So within that XY world, there is on our journey, there's a first half of life and considerations regarding earlier on in life. And there's a second half of life of which everyone here is involved with in the second half of life, the concerns regarding the second half. In the first phase right here of our, there's going to be two, in our first half of life is what I call order. Now, this isn't, I didn't define this. This comes from people. Richard Rohr defines the masculine journey within this light. Our senior pastor talks about, Bert Wright talks about order, disorder. And I've adopted these three words, order, disorder, and reorder, which you'll see, because I think it's a clearer description of what we're trying to express. So I've adopted that. I used to call it ascent because it's an upward line, and I'm now changing to the word order. And it probably doesn't mean make any difference to you guys, but it does to me. But I think during this formative years of order, I want to believe, and from experience, that we as men, especially, I'm talking about men, we tend to ask the question, do I have what it takes? We may ask it in different forms. I don't look at that as a negative question. I look at it as a positive question because I'm in the season of life where I'm attempting to understand me. I'm attending to build a framework so I can understand who God made me to be. And that's what the y-axis is all about. I'm moving back and forth, mirroring people, listening to people, learning from people, learning to do and say the right things and what doesn't work. And so I'm building this, it's about building. I'm asking questions like, God, what school will I go to? And, what am I good at? And who will I go through life with? Uh, what kind of house will I live in? What kind of job will I have? How much money will I make? And these are all necessary parts of the formative years is to build this person. Um, and we tend to do it through our constructs. I don't think we're born in animosity towards God. I think sin occurs because we're brought into this world and the interactions that take place, and there's a lot of woundedness within this world. I mean, just think about it. A brand new baby is born, a wonderful gift from God, and created by God, this wonderful baby. But that baby is thrown into a world where that baby is being raised by adults that have barely worked through their own issues. And so these at 20 years old, what do you know? But you're doing the best you can. And so it's just the world we live in. And I interpret Genesis 3 from that perspective. But from the very get-go, our identity is that we are beloved by the Father, by our Creator. Jesus calls that entity the Father. So order is about building, and the goal of it is we're bracketing the y-axis and we're saying we got to formulate some sort of identity. And I think this is so important. A lot of young men get to a point of 20, 30 years old, and they still don't know, have any idea of who they are. But this is my belief that an identity has to exist. We've got to have some understanding of who we are, because we're going to lose that. And the direction, the masculine journey is that has to die. And again, this is the framework I'm working from. So all of this is forming to this point, and what happens is that if we're healthy, if we're raised in a healthy environment, we have some idea who we are when we're in our 20s and 30s. Some idea. It's starting to come together, and I would say that this is part of it, and this is part of it, because we're people of faith, and of course we know we are loved by God. We know it on paper. But embracing it is quite a different story, fellas. From my observations, we as followers of Jesus, it's a lifelong journey. It's not just I read it in a book and I go, well, God loves you and gave himself for you. Oh, I get it fully. I think we kind of get it, but I think we struggle with it. And this, again, is my if we didn't struggle with it, we wouldn't have so many social problems that we're dealing with. So anyway, this is the goal of the of order, is to come to some understanding of who I am as a person. This starts. So I build something. I built something, and this kind of gives way to the second stage in the first half of life. And I'm going to stop it there. And it's going to be a line, a jagged line like this, up and down. When that line is headed down, it represents an open hand, because I'm learning that the way forward is through opening my hand and not being so rigid and having my way. This is what Jesus is teaching us. This is the way to godliness, is the opening of the hand. But man, this is scary. Let's see, I can write the word scary. This goes, that's hard. That says scary. That's counterintuitive. That's hard for me, because I gotta have substance. I've got to have my alignment, because I'm human. And when things go outside of that, I go tilt, and that's scary. And so what I tend to do is move into the second line is the line going up. I get control. I clasp my fist and I go, no, that's just not going to work. I got to do it this way. And there's a good aspect to that, and there's a real downside to that. But that is a phase of life that we go into, and this is exactly where Peter is at this time. His life has been pretty much about control, but he is now in a paramount time, even though it seems absolutely devastating to Peter. He is needing to let go here, a let go of his self perception of who Peter is. So this continues for quite some time. And in our latter portion of the first half of life, we are moving. My wife isn't in alignment with who I think she needs to be. Our kids are not in alignment with how I think they need to be. My boss is not in alignment. And so I move in this really, really a dynamic way of up and down and life, and I call it life pushing in. I've retained that phrase because I've created what I think things need to be, and things are just not lining up. And we've got an example of this happening in Peter's world in a very profound way. So that is disorder. And that's where I would put Peter right in this place of disorder. But that's not the end. That is not the end at all. Remember, there's got to be an end before there's a beginning. And this is going to lead Peter into what I'm calling, generally speaking, the second half of life. I'm not saying you have to be 50 some years old in order to get this. I think that's generally true. I think older people tend to move in this realm, but I'm sure there's exceptions. The second half of life, the third phase, is called reorder. And it's where we start to understand experientially to be free of me, and that means the me that I have created. We start to get in touch with in an argument or a response to my spouse. I start to go, whoa, just back off here. This is a beautiful aspect of Sandra, and I let this go and just embrace it. And I learn to stop and be more cautious before I react and try to bring things into my alignment. And that's what I'm calling being free of me. The way I've responded for 40 some years or more as an adult, what I've created. And I believe this is what Jesus is demonstrating. So there is an order, there is a disorder, and a reorder. And this is very broad strokes of a way to understand the masculine journey. Now, it could apply, I think it does apply to the female journey, but we're not talking about that here. Now, Paul, I'm going to use a verse to talk about, because this is where you and I are living our lives. And I think from an experiential state, we can start to understand what Paul is talking about at this stage in Galatians 2:20, for one example. There's many examples. Paul states at a senior age, I have been crucified with Christ. That is, whoa. And but yet I no longer live. There's this dynamic of being in the material world, but living in and through that world with the Christ who is existing within me. That is a profound idea and the very core of the gospel. Christ lives in me. Now, he goes back, he says, the life I now live in the material world, the body. I live by faith, which I would tie directly to reorder. I'm reordering my life. I'm, not so fast here. I'm living by faith in the Son of God, who is dynamically within me right now, and I am in him. There is a union that is inseparable. And he's the one who loved me and gave himself for me. That is a mouthful. So it's not a theological statement as much as it is Paul stating from experience what this is like, union in Christ. And he's talking about this at this stage of life that you and I are very familiar with right now. Prior to this stage of life, when we're in disorder, it's not about this. It's about me getting my way and learning to let go of my way. But in the latter stage of life, we at least know, because we fogged a mirror for 70 plus years, 60 plus years, 70 years, we know what this is like and the outcome of when we do. Okay, so one more quote from poet T.S. Eliot. I've loved this quote. We shall not cease from exploration. This is T.S. Eliot's commentary on the same idea. We as people are built to explore. And I think that's a recognition of how we are created in Christ, created in this material world. And we explore, we go through life and whatever our journey is, and the end of all our exploring, this third phase of this reorder time of life, will be to arrive where we started. And to know that place for the first time. That is a profound idea. And I think it rings so true. I don't think it's an automatic at all. I think it's through choice. We can choose to be there, or we can choose our own world. We can choose to do it our way, or we can choose to do it his way. And that's not a one-time thing. That is a day by day, moment by moment. And it really shows up when there's a time of conflict. So the invitation is to return to what it means. I can't read that on my screen. So the invitation is to return to what it means to live life as fully human. This, I think, is our journey, is to live. C.S. Lewis talked about this many times in his metaphors. Remember in the Chronicles of Narnia, there was this whole idea of becoming real, becoming solid. That's what he's talking about. There's this, there is becoming what we were really meant to live as, is fully human. And from my perspective, fellas, this is what Jesus is demonstrating to us. When we see Jesus demonstrating what it means to be fully human. So in our summary of this, this graph, disorder, order, disorder, and reorder, the summary statements is under the order, we could summarize it like this. Order is about building. It's really about building. And this is the early time of life. It's the kind of life which is epitomized by our culture. It's reflected back as this is what you need to do. And it's got all kinds of aspects that we could talk about. It's not all bad. There's some very great things about this, but it's mixed for sure. It is motivated by assumptions about how things work. This is the way it is, especially about God, self, and the world. This is order, and we build ourselves to an identity that is partially true, but part of that needs to be let go. We have the second phase of life within the first half of life. Disorder, and this is where I see Peter demonstrating right now. Disorder is the collapse or rupture of that framework. I am being invited to come to a place where I realize this is in question and a lot of this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's trauma. I mean, there's all kinds of human reaction, trauma, confusion, disorientation. Identity crisis is the big one. Who am I really? That's really what Peter's example here is not a moral failure. This is where our heads go. Oh, he really failed Jesus. No, Peter's human. Peter had to lose Peter for the true Peter to emerge into what we're going to see in the rest of the New Testament. This had to happen because Peter had to lose Peter. Just like that same process is going on in us, and it's an invitation. And as a result, like Steve quoted earlier this morning, Jesus says, I have come to give you life and life more abundant. And this happens to be how it occurs. The last phase is reorder. And when we get to reorder, we kind of think preserving the past. That has been a lot of my Christian upbringing, is preserving the past from how we interpret the New Testament. And I'm not critical. I'm very grateful for my Christian upbringing, actually. I mean, it's just the emphasis on the Bible and on what is true and what is right. And, these things, the substance, I'm greatly value. But my perception at age 71 is that it's not about preserving as much as moving forward with a deeper, more truthful understanding of what is actually true. And Jesus represents that. Who we are, what it means to be human, living in relationship, what it means to be human. And I really fall hard on the fact that I think we have a lot to learn with what that means through what Jesus is teaching us. So there's the summary. Now I want to move to table time. We've talked about, I've introduced this slide, and I purposely ended it here this morning. I've got some other slides, but it was just too much. I wanted to spend time on this because I really want your input. Does this align with your thinking? Does this give you a grid, a general understanding of a general overview of how do we understand life as a man? And so we've introduced this as a way, not the way, of thinking about the masculine journey. And our intent is to understand what Peter is going through at this time in life, which is right here, as far as from the diagram. And I think that's helpful to understand he's on a journey. And we happen to know the rest of the story. We're going to see a different Peter. So I would like to know your thoughts, fellas. I think we'd all like to know your comments. And how have you seen order? Just a general question, and you're free, the floor is open. How have you seen this order, disorder, and reorder lived out in either other people or from your own uh, promptings, some own story, your own stories? Guys, we would love to hear from what you have to say about this. So the floor is yours.
I don't see Tatsi online, so I'm probably the senior citizen of the group this morning. And when we started this morning, I started to say, where are we going with this? But now that you've laid it all out, for me, it is a really accurate prediction of my life path.
Oh, wow.
Um, I just recently had a birthday, and I tell people I'm 48 and I have dyslexia. But
I'm going to hopefully remember that one.
but anyway, I am really aware that I think God is really trying to work through me in this reorder of freeing freeing myself of me.
Wow.
And the me I've created over a lifetime of really pointing towards excellence and success and all that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And it's I'm trying to really live out now a life of humility. I don't have to be the leader of the pack, that kind of thing.
Mhm. Boy, Bob, that is so meaningful to all of us. My question in my own journey is why in the world does it take so long? And I don't have an answer to that. It just takes what it takes. But you're resonating exactly. It's a different. What you're saying to all of us, Bob, is you're really thinking a different way than you did 40 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 I find myself when I'm on good days in this reorder part of life that I'm relating, I believe, and I think, yeah, I think she would say the same thing. I believe that Sandy and I are relating to each other the best that we've ever lived, and we're 63 years into marriage.
Right. Boy, that is just wonderful news.
Hmm.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Hey, Mike, I had a thought as I was looking at your diagram, and thinking about Peter. So Peter was this confident man that told Jesus, "I will never, you know,
Right.
forsake you. God will die for you." And Peter had to fail.
Yeah.
Peter got to a point and he failed miserably before he could get to the point where he was working toward how God and how Christ wanted him to be. So I look at this diagram and I think for a lot of people, that order line is much longer and maybe even steeper.
It could be. Yeah.
It gets up there and they don't realize that their definition of self is blurred, compared to what God wanted them to be because they're
Yeah.
doing it all in their own strength and they're succeeding.
Yeah. You.
And some people almost never get to the point of failure, but when they do, then the drop off is so much more drastic, so much steeper in the reorder portion of their life. I think this defines most of us. But I think that's the battle is we have these little zigzags in life where we trying to do things in our own strength, and then we fail, and then God brings us back toward where he wants us to be, and then we go, okay, I got it, God, and we go back up, and we're fighting again to be who we think we ought to be, and then we fail again, and God says, okay, this is where I want you. I want you to come back toward me. So I like this diagram. I think for the most part, it really hits home as far as the zigs and zags go, and I'm just trying to figure out where I am right now in the zigs and zags,
Right.
you
That's
know, and
yeah.
and I want to be. It's weird because it in a lot of these diagrams, low is bad. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But this one, low is good because it puts us
Oh, you
back.
got that. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, it puts us back where we God wants us to be, who God made us to be. Hopefully I'm on that trend on the reorder line, but it's I think it's one of those things I need to think about, on a daily basis. Am I trending up toward my own constructs of who I think I am and being strong, and I'm able to do this on my own or whatever, or am I trending back toward God, which looks bad on the graph, but is actually where I want to be, is heading down away from myself to God.
Yeah. Boy, Jeff, like you always do, I would say always, you've really clarified it. It's really affirming to me of how you understand of what I attempted to communicate. You said it exactly. You used the term blur. That time when we build our identity, there's a blurred aspect. There's wonderful aspects. It's necessary. We've got to have it, but it's somehow mixed, and it's not who um, there's a portion of that needs to die. And you said Peter need to die. I agree with that. I would qualify that, and I would say the Peter that Peter created needs to die. And you're nodding, and I think we both the same thing, because it's not a morbid thing at all. It's an invitation, and it takes a while. It's interesting. Bob talked clearly uh, from this perspective. You're Jeff. You're talking from somewhere in this perspective, and that's the journey.
Mhm. That
That's
is the journey.
yeah.
And I
With
find
deference and love and respect to the resident dyslexic, I think some of us, myself included, somewhere along the line, uh, we hope, we expect, we look forward to some sort of gentle ride toward a beautiful sunset, and which is a lot of what Bob has described. Relationship with our wives, um, things in quote unquote good order,
Yeah.
uh, healthy relationship with the father. Um, I've found that the older I get, the less adept I am at zigging and zagging, and there is some of that. Certainly physically, that's true, but I think to a degree, emotionally and even spiritually, it's harder to suddenly change course all the time. So
Mhm.
for me on this disorder and reorder, as I approach 80, um, things are not what I had hoped. I have a wife with dementia.
Mhm.
I have one child from whom I am almost completely, um, uh,
Yeah.
the word even escapes me,
Yeah.
separated.
Yeah.
And the second one that's close, that is now being extremely critical about anything and everything that I say or do, neither of whom are local, so the relationship is strained because communication is more difficult. Um, so I'm in a I guess a different state of reordering, because of major circumstances that by and large, I don't believe I've brought on myself by bad decisions. It's come along because, as we've discussed before, Mike, and certainly this is one thing that of four statements that you've used a lot in the past in your teaching, and it's also one that John Winning said, life is hard. Right. And sometimes it isn't as hard as it is other times. Right now, for me, life is hard.
Yeah.
So I'm going through a reordering process of a unique nature.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow, Dave. Thank you very much. My heart goes out to you and all of us.
Yeah.
So Mike,
Dave,
Mike,
Dave-
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go
Well, I
ahead.
was just saying, Dave reminded us that the reorder doesn't necessarily go in a nice smooth line like we've got it depicted in there. Every now and then it really takes a giant zag when we think we're in the middle of this reorder phase of our life. We can find out that, yeah, we're still a little bit in the disorder, and eventually we will get down to where God wants us to be.
Yeah, I would look at that as also just it's on a graph. It's a line, and life sometimes doesn't line up like that. It's a very general.
Yeah.
But my guess, Dave, is that at at your season time of life, and you are definitely an elder in the faith in numerous regards. Your reaction to the circumstances in life are quite different than they would have been back 40 years ago. Yeah. And that has everything to do with faith. John, you had a comment, and then we're going to wrap there. So,
Yeah. So, a good description of, first half, second half, and first half, the order thing. I don't think that's something consciously we try to, well, today I'm going to wake up and get my life ordered, right? It just kind of happens, right? It's kind of looking back, and it's just a good picture of how we spend the first part of our life. And then bonk, life happens, disorder comes, life pushes in, and again, it just happens, right? And and we finally reorder, get to the end here, and we reorder our life. But again, I would offer and suggest that maybe it's not something consciously that oh, I'm going to really work. I want to be like Bob Powell. I'm going to reorder my life, right? Or is it just something that happens in the second half of life? And I would say, I mean, Mike, what I would offer to all this, and I think the real conversation needs to be is now what? Okay, I got my life reordered. Now what? What do we have to offer people? What is there a hope? What is the hope? My neighbor is in great disorder. I'm going to go have breakfast with him, right? What is the hope? Hey, the hope, neighbor, is get your life reordered and it'll be much better. I'll be human. And I would only say that God's given us X amount of time. And the point is something more than being a good human. And the question is, so what is this? What do we have to offer people? Is it just like, I can be at peace with myself, but is that a false peace or is that a real peace? And in the middle of the storm, the question is, so where does this God thing fit in this? Right? Is it just a belief system? Or is there something else that we're to be holding on to? So I would say this sets the stage and describes a lot of what has happened. But in terms of our spiritual journey, the question is, where does that fit in? What is that about?
thank you, John. Appreciate your comments. So next week, let's go ahead and meet we're going to take this. I actually created one teaching, but I cut it off right here because there's so much on this. And thank you all for your contribution this morning. But let's dive a little bit more what disorder feels like to Peter, what he's going through, and we'll look at that next week on Wednesday. So guys, thank you for coming and being a part of this and for your contributions, and have a good week, fellas. We got the blue line here. I don't know what to do with it, but it's not on my slide, so I didn't do it. Bye for now, fellas.
See you guys.
Good week.
Bye.
Oh, there's Carl. Hey, Carl, I finally see you. I didn't see you before. Bye for now.
I think the blue line's gone.